Hey everyone, and welcome. Let's just jump right in. In today's explainer, our goal is to give you a fully informative, truly comprehensive breakdown of the pre-Columbian Americas. We're going to completely dismantle some of those old myths and dive deep into the true origins, the complex societies, and honestly, the staggering achievements of these native worlds. We're packing this full of information, so get ready. We're looking at a world that existed in total isolation for literally thousands of years, developing on a completely parallel track to Europe and Asia, right up until a fateful collision changed human history forever.
So I want to start us off with this incredibly powerful, just tragic quote from a Natchez elder in 1728. The Natchez were an indigenous people living right along the Mississippi River, and this emotional plea perfectly sets the stage for what was an absolute catastrophic clash of three continents. Before 1492, Native Americans obviously didn't know Europeans existed, nor did they know of Africans. And honestly, even among their own dispersed tribes across the vast Americas, there was very little mutual understanding. But when Christopher Columbus arrived and subsequently brought African slaves over on his second voyage, the fates of Europe, Africa, and the Americas became permanently, and very unequally, intertwined.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. 1. The tragedy of the Natchez. 2. Journey to the Americas. 3. Great agricultural legacy. 4. The mystery of the wheel. And 5. Power of the empire.
Section 1. The tragedy of the Natchez. A clash of three continents.
It's honestly staggering how fast this cultural destruction actually happened. The mixing of peoples from these three continents was in no way based on equality. European colonizers quickly positioned themselves as absolute rulers. By 1728, pushed entirely to the brink, that Natchez elder called for an armed rebellion against the French, which ignited the Natchez War. But guys, just 3 years later, by 1731, they were utterly defeated. Many were captured and sold straight into slavery in the West Indies, while others were just forced to flee for their lives. Today, there are practically no Natchez people living in the city of Natchez, Mississippi. Their descendants are scattered across indigenous reservations in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Oklahoma. And tragically, the same exact story was repeated countless times across the entire continent.
Moving on to Section 2, Journey to the Americas, Crossing the Ice.
Okay, so zooming way out for a second, where did the indigenous peoples actually come from? Well, native traditions offer some incredibly rich, varied origin stories. The Navajo of the Southwest, for instance, believe their ancestors emerged directly from the earth itself. But there's this fascinating legend from the Tuscarora in North Carolina that scholars find super compelling. They speak of ancient ancestors in an old world who, facing a terrible famine, walked across vast ice fields toward the rising sun in the east until they finally found a bountiful new land. And this is so cool because it brilliantly illustrates how ancient oral history can actually mirror our hard scientific consensus. Because historically, during the last ice age, sea levels dropped so low that they exposed a massive land bridge called Beringia, connecting Asia and the Americas. Over tens of thousands of years, starting as early as 40,000 years ago, waves of ancient East Asian hunters just followed the game across this bridge. Now, this wasn't a quick weekend trip, right? Over immense stretches of time, generations moved from Alaska all the way down to Patagonia at the very southern tip of South America and spread eastward. Then, when the Ice Age ended around 12,000 years ago, melting glaciers raised the oceans, completely submerging Beringia. The Americas were entirely cut off. And those populations? They lived, adapted, and multiplied in absolute isolation for over 400 generations.
But here's a bit of a biological mystery I want you to think about. While Native Americans physically share lots of traits with East Asians, and the archaeology strongly supports that Beringia migration, there is a major genetic anomaly. East Asian populations heavily feature blood type B, yet Native Americans are almost exclusively blood types A or O. Why is that? This fascinating gap suggests that there might be other, still undiscovered ancient migration routes, with entirely different populations blending together to create the Native Americans of today.
Section 3. Great agricultural legacy. Feeding the world.
Now let's talk about their agricultural achievements, because they were nothing short of revolutionary. High-yield crops like corn, potatoes, and pumpkins completely transformed European diets and literally helped stabilize global populations. And think about global culture for a second. You know the fiercely spicy cuisines of Sichuan and Hunan in China? That is entirely thanks to the introduction of peppers from the Americas. Cacao gave us chocolate, tobacco obviously became a massive global habit. Throw in sweet potatoes, tomatoes, sunflowers, and rubber, and you really start to see the immense scale of their contribution to our modern world.
Get this, it's absolutely astonishing to realize that over half of all agricultural crops cultivated in the entire world today originated natively in the Americas. This was not just accidental foraging. This was advanced, deliberate agricultural science developed by these peoples over millennia.
Section 4. The Mystery of the Wheel. Technological Contrasts.
Now, when comparing the Eastern and Western hemispheres, the Americas had two really glaring absences. First, they had absolutely no horses or large beasts of burden like cows or sheep. The biggest domesticated animal they had over there was the alpaca, and as you can guess, you can't exactly hitch a heavy plow or a wagon to an alpaca. And the second, even more critical absence, they never actually invented the wheel for transportation. Think about that for a second. Every massive block of stone for their temples, every single ear of corn, had to be carried solely on human backs or shoulders.
Now, you might be wondering, why were there no horses? It's a great question. Well, ancient horses actually did exist in the Americas way back when. But scholars believe that when ancient humans arrived, their hunting skills were just too incredibly advanced. Before the population of wild horses could ever be tamed or domesticated, like they successfully were in Europe and Asia, they were hunted to complete extinction by these apex predators.
Section 5. Power of the Empire. The Rise of Tenochtitlan.
To set the historical stage here, the mighty Maya civilization dominated Mesoamerica for a long time, but they largely collapsed around 800 AD. To put that in perspective, that's right around the time of China's Tang dynasty. Scholars blame a pretty deadly combination of severe, prolonged drought, endless warfare between rival city-states, and subsequent disease. And this collapse left a massive power vacuum in the region. Stepping right into that vacuum were the Aztecs, who originated from the Mexican highlands. In 1325, they founded Tenochtitlan, and this wasn't just a city, it was an absolute engineering marvel. They built it ingeniously right on top of artificial islands in the middle of Lake Texcoco. Fun fact, that is the exact site of modern-day Mexico City.
Even despite lacking wheels and beasts of burden, the Aztec economy was an absolute powerhouse. They maintained these vast trade networks, stretching way north and south, entirely reliant on merchants traveling for miles and miles on foot. They traded furs, gold, gorgeous textiles, and food. And because they completely lacked iron-smelting technology, they relied on obsidian, which is a natural volcanic glass, to craft devastatingly razor-sharp weapons and tools.
Their governance system was also terrifyingly effective. Both the Aztecs in Mesoamerica and the Incas down in South America utilized what's called theocratic absolutism. Think ancient Egypt or Rome here. Extreme political and religious authority was totally fused together and held by supreme high priests. This elite class controlled massive wealth and could seamlessly mobilize millions of citizens and conquered tribes, making these empires incredibly formidable to any challenger, inside or out.
Get a load of this number. By the year 1500, right as the Spanish were just starting to explore the Caribbean, the population of Tenochtitlan had reached a staggering 200,000 people. Make no mistake, with their massive population, highly organized society, and incredibly fierce military culture, if the Aztec Empire had decided to fully mobilize against those early, small bands of Spanish conquistadors, they absolutely had the power to crush them.
So, we've seen the incredible scale of the empires in Mesoamerica and South America, but this leaves us with a final, super fascinating question drawn straight from our historical sources. What about the indigenous peoples further north, up in what is now the US and Canada? Without massive stone cities, how did they survive and thrive? Were they gentle rabbits living in simple harmony with nature, or were they fierce, cunning wolves ruling their territories? Well, that is a mystery we'll just have to explore next time. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and remember to always keep questioning history.